Hey everyone, Snowflakey's Emos here today with a new deck profile. This is my Grandtusk Dragon Control deck profile. This is a deck that's very reminiscent of a playstyle similar to the Thunderclap Skywolf that was in a rogue sense a few formats ago, and kind of has the same idea. Grandtusk Dragon is a newer card that we got that just says when this card is more special summon, you can target cards on the field and destroy it. So we're basically going to be playing a deck that's just dumping this in the graveyard as fast as possible and then constantly summoning it back out to disrupt our opponent during their turn, and combined with other really powerful traps, going to give our opponent a tough time and then beat them down. So with that said, let's get into the card by card. Starting off with our monsters, I am playing copies of the namesake Grandtusk Dragon. Definitely worth considering 3 of, but 2 for right now is pretty solid. Grandtusk Dragon is a 1400 attack, 8-star dragon monster that says if this card is normal or special summon, target up to 2 cards on the field and destroy them, and if you do, this card gains 600 attack for each card destroyed. So when you're summoning this card out, you're popping 2 cards, and you're gaining a nice 1200 attack, making a 2600 attack power monster. Pretty cool. It's pretty nice that it can pop anything, so it can pop spell and traps or monsters, and we're going to be using that to the fullest with this deck. That way it can handle back row decks, which is something that Thunderclap Skywolf struggled with, and it can take care of monsters. So it's a pretty good card. We're just going to dump it in the grave, summon it out, and pop cards. Next up from monsters, I am playing 1 copy of Blue Eyes White Dragon. Blue Eyes White Dragon is just a 3000 attack normal monster that is nice because we're playing Dragon Shrine in this deck, so we can just dump Blue Eyes for free and another Grandtusk Dragon. And playing Blue Eyes allows us to use our next card, which is Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. So Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, of course, is a 3000 attack monster. Its effect says that other cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while this card's on the field. And of course, when Blue Eyes Jet Dragon is, when you destroy a card while Blue Eyes is in the graveyard and you have Blue Eyes Jet Dragon either in your hand or graveyard, you can special summon it, which is nice, gets you an extra 3000 attack body on board. And of course, when this card, is involved in battle, you can return 1 card to the hand, which is pretty nice. So it's got a little hand bounce. It's got a way to constantly resummon itself just by destroying cards, which we're going to be doing a lot in this deck. So just something I thought that would be nice to include in, especially since Blue Eyes is such an easy free extra drop off of Dragon Shrine, and gives this deck a little more offensive presence than the Thunderclap Skywolf deck. And I like that because, while the disruption is nice, you mostly need to do it, get your opponent to blank their turn, and then finish them off really quickly. If your opponent letting your opponent have 3 or more turns, you might not be able to keep up with what they're doing. So Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, good tool to have. And last for monsters, I am playing 1 copy of the White Stone of Ancients. White Stone Ancients is just another card we can be sending to the graveyard, and it can pull Jet Dragon directly out of the deck. Or, of course, it could pull Blue Eyes out of the deck if Jet Dragon was already in our hand. So just that ability to get a monster on board if we're still waiting for Grandtusk Dragon is just nice. Just another way to pull the whole Blue Eyes Jet cards into rotation. And that is it for the monsters. Very low monster count in this deck. Next, we're going into our spell cards. Starting off, I am playing 3 copies of Dragon Shrine. Now, this is definitely more copies than I can resolve, but I always want to see this card in the opening hand, so I'm playing 3 of it to just increase that ability. So Dragon Shrine, of course, is a nice card. We can send a dragon from our deck to the graveyard. If that monster we send was a normal monster, we can send an additional dragon to the graveyard. So that's pretty nice. We can send Blue Eyes, of course, and then allow us to freely dump our Grandtusk Dragon, or if we already have Grandtusk Dragon ready to go, we can put Jet in, or Stone of Ancients to pull Jet out of the deck. Just a very nice way to get the monsters out of the deck and make sure our top decks are, the trap cards or cards that are just going to be moving things along. So Dragon Shrine is a great card to have. Likewise, I'm playing a copy of Foolish Burial. We're trying to get our cards in the graveyard, so Foolish is nice. We just send 1 monster from the deck to the graveyard. And just as the last of the sending to the graveyard package, I'm playing 2 copies of Dragon's Ravine. This is probably the worst of our cards to get dragons to the grave, just because a lot of cards we want to keep in our hand, but it allows us to discard a card from our hand and send a dragon monster to the grave. It is pretty nice if you have one of these guys stuck in your hand that you can just discard and get more materials in the grave. We want to do that anyway, so Dragon Shrine gives us the ability to do that. Next up, we are playing 3 Pot of Extravagance. We want to dig through our deck, and there's not a lot of extra deck plays to be made here, so we're going to banish 6 random extra deck cards and draw 2. Can't be complaining about that. Next, I'm playing 3 Pot of Duality. Other than using White Stones of Ancients, there's not necessarily a lot of need to special summon on our turn, so you know, we can sometimes forego our special summon to dig through our deck for another good card. We reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add it to the hand, and shuffle the rest back in. In exchange, we can't special summon. Good for digging out a key combo piece. And last for spells, I'm playing a copy of Card of Demise. Card of Demise says we draw until we have 3 cards in our hand, and of course, once this card resolves, our opponent doesn't take any damage. We have to send everything in our hand to the graveyard at the end of the turn, but we're playing lots of spells and traps, so we're just going to be setting a lot of those cards. And, you know, we can't special summon on the turn we use it, which is not a big deal because, you know, we're not doing a lot of special summoning on our turn anyway. We're waiting till our opponent's turn because we want to, you know, Grandtusk pop cards in the middle of their play. And that is it for the spell cards. Moving into our trap cards, we are starting off with 3 copies of Back to the Front. Back to the Front just says target a monster in your graveyard and special summon it in defense mode. That's pretty nice. We're playing lots of these revival traps because we want to pull Grandtusk Dragon out so that we can activate its effects and then pop cards during our opponent's turn. And 2400 defense is pretty solid, so you know, if they're not really building their board, they might not have monsters that can get over that. And just a good tool to have. It's nice that this one's not continuous, so it can't be destroyed by back row removal. Well, I mean, it can't destroy the monster if it gets destroyed by back row removal. Next, we're playing 3 copies of Oasis of Dragon Souls. This one, we target a monster in our graveyard and special summon it in defense. Now it becomes a worm monster, which isn't that big of a deal. We don't care too much about that. But Oasis of Dragon Soul is pretty nice, just because, you know, another card that gets our card out, and we want to get Grandtusk Dragon out and pop cards. And for the last of the set, I'm playing 3 of the classic Call of the Haunted, classic continuous trap card. Just says we target a monster in our graveyard and special summon it in face-up attack position. And of course, if this card's destroyed, that card gets destroyed too. But, you know, that's nice. We're going to summon Grandtusk Dragon. We're going to summon Blue Eyes, you know, all that good stuff. And we'll take that. So that's all our traps that we're using to revive cards from the grave. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is also just another board wipe, and since this whole deck is kind of built on being board wipe.deck, Torrential Tribute is very nice to have here. It just says when a monster is summoned, destroy all monsters on the field, so that's pretty cool. What's nice about this is that we can play Grandtusk Dragon, pop some cards, then if our opponent summons more monsters, we can Torrential Tribute our board, getting rid of our Grandtusk Dragon and their second wave of monsters, and then if they had a third wave, we could reborn, you know, we could keep the loop going, which is pretty cool. Just a nice way to get Grandtusk Dragon off the field back into the grave so that you have it for a follow-up turn and can continually wipe the board. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Summon Limit. Summon Limit is a very powerful trap card that is one of the main win cons of this deck, because what's nice about Summon Limit is that neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. We're not going to be really pushing that, so it doesn't hinder us much, but it works out really well with Torrential Tribute or Grandtusk Dragon, because if our opponent summons 2 monsters, we can revive Grandtusk Dragon and chain Summon Limit. Grandtusk Dragon can then pop those 2 monsters, and, you know, our opponent's already used their 2 summons, their 2 monsters are gone, they're just gonna, you know, it's very likely they can pass on an open board, and that's nice because we can poke for damage, especially if we have Jet Dragon and Grandtusk Dragon. That's 5,600 damage, so just need to do that one more time to win the game, and, you know, that is a good deal for us. Additionally, to give our opponent some struggle, we are playing 2 copies of Rivalry of the Warlords. Rivalry of the Warlords is an interesting card because each player can only control one type of monster. Now everything, of course, we control is dragon, unless the only thing to keep in mind is that our Oasis of Dragon Souls is going to turn a monster into a worm monster, so you're not going to be able to keep it on the field with dragons. But you know, that's not that bad. We don't have a lot of monsters on the field anyway, and Rivalry can just hose certain matchups, and that's kind of what we need to do to win here. So Rivalry of the Warlords is just a nice little additional tool to help hinder an opponent's play. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. If we have our floodgates set up, if we have a whole lot of back row, we don't want to get lightning stormed, we don't want to get evenly, we don't want to get, Harpy's Feather Dustered. So Solemn Judgment is just a nice card. We pay half our life points to negate a summon or a spell or trap card activation, and that can just be very handy once we've got set up. If our opponent has it out, we want to say no to that, just push 1 extra turn, and that turn can be the difference maker. So, and last for our trap cards, I am playing 2 copies of Waking the Dragon. Likewise, to punish the Lightning Storm, evenly Harpy's Feather Duster played, we are playing Waking the Dragon, which just says if this set card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect and is now in the graveyard or banished, we can, use its effect to special summon out a monster from our deck or extra deck, and we're just going to pack our extra deck with good targets. So if we get Lightning Stormed, Waking the Dragon's going to activate and summon out a really powerful monster that's going to be hard for our opponent to deal with, and likewise for Harpy's Feather Duster. So, that is it for the main deck. Going into our extra deck real quick, I am playing 3 copies of Last Warrior from Another Planet. This extra deck is all targets that can be summoned off of Waking the Dragon. Last Warrior from Another Planet is a really nice card because it just says when this card's on the field, neither player can summon monsters. So if their opponent's board is open when they hit us with the Lightning Storm or the Harpy's Feather Duster, we can summon Last Warrior, and then all they could do is set monsters, and we can whittle away. So just a nice option to have. Next up, we are playing 3 copies of Naturia Exterio. Exterio is a good monster to pull out in certain matchups that are very spell and trap dependent, because this card can negate spells and traps on either player's turn, and not even once per turn. All you have to do is have a card in the graveyard to banish, and then send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. So as long as you have that set up, you can keep banishing spells and traps infinitely. So if a matchup is very dependent on their spells and traps resolving, they are not going to like to see that card. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon is a nice boss monster to have. It's a 3,500 attack monster that's unaffected by other card effects. That makes it really hard to deal with. You're either going to have to kaiju over it or find a way to beat it by battle. And there are just certain decks and matchups that are not going to be able to deal with that monster, and that makes Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon a good target to go into. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. This monster has 4,500 attack. Now it can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects, which is not as good as being unaffected, but still pretty good. And 4,500 attack, an extra 1,000 attack is pretty nice to have. Additionally, this card has an effect that we can destroy a card on the field instead of attacking with it this turn, and that can come in handy. Just a good option to fill out the extra deck. And lastly, I am playing 3 copies of Yugioh Mathmech Final Sigma. When we special summon this card in the extra monster zone, it's unaffected by card effects except Mathmech cards, which basically makes it a, Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon, but it's got 500 less attack, which isn't so bad, but it does gain the effect that when you do battle damage to your opponent by battle with a monster with this card, that battle damage is doubled. So that's really nice if they have a weak attack monster on the field and you just want to, rip through it and do a lot of damage. So a good option to have to round out our Waking the Dragon extra deck. So that is it for my Grandtusk Dragon deck. Pretty cool deck to have. I very much enjoyed playing Thunderclap Skywolf, and this deck plays very much the same. I think this card is pretty sick looking too, so it's just nice to actually find a use for this card. Pretty good card, for Felgrand players and whatnot. But, I've decided to go all out, try it out. I like it a lot because it can destroy monsters just like Thunderclap Skywolf does, but also has the ability to destroy spell and trap cards. So a little quid pro quo about both. It's just a fun kind of variant of the same deck, and very much enjoy playing it. So let me know what you think. I appreciate you checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.